Welcome back to Security Shift by Fault Agentics, where we break down what's really happening in cybersecurity with the people actually building the future. Today, we've got someone who's been doing this work long before it was trendy, Ken Dunham, CEO of 45A Security. Let's get into it. Ken, great to have you here. For those who may not know the depth of your background, incident response, intel, malware analysis, decades in the field, give us the short version of your journey. What's the thread that ties it all together as well?
Yeah, thanks. I was just had a passion in it. And when I got started, there wasn't really a field for it. It wasn't really a buzzword or anything like that. And I remember when I went to school, I was just trying to figure out how to make my parents proud of me. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do either. I think that's what a lot of people do when you're young. And so I went into education, but I knew I wanted to do something on computers. And at the same time, I was programming and trying to figure out what the internet was. And this is before we had point and click internet. And next thing you know, I discovered this virus. I was doing all this programming and creating the antivirus software. One thing led to another. And all of a sudden, I had this world famous website, world famous software. That just snowballed into a bunch of crazy. So I found myself in full-time security and innovation along the way. I did some innovative new training programs for the Air Force and reconnaissance, kind of got wrapped up in some DoD and DIP stuff. And that was a perfect mix for counter threat intelligence, which is a big area of what I've done for a long time. And really anything that's an emergent threat, it's my job to find it and get rid of it. And especially in the area of cyber. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a really interesting journey and it's really complicated in the world of cyber. It keeps changing, which is why I love it.
Yep. Even more so in the recent past, right? So,
Right. Totally. I mean, AI now and all of that. And we've got these really complicated infrastructures and good luck with that. It's going to be very difficult.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, tell me, Ken, a little bit about kind of what's driven you throughout your journey, right? So it sounds like you've been across so many areas. Now you're obviously at the intersection of quite a few of them opportunistically, but all around. I mean, how has your journey been shaped? What are some pivotal moments you could share?
Yeah. Well, initially it was what my parents taught me on the farm, which is just hard work ethic, working really hard with other people that had a similar vision and a dream and aligning on that and being a good collaborator. And nose to the grindstone, and when it gets hard and when you make mistakes, fail quickly and be willing to take risks. I learned how to do that when I was young. A lot of people aren't willing to take risks. They just press the comfortable button. And you've got to be willing to do that if you want to be a game changer. And that comes with failure. And most people are not comfortable with failure. I used to have a huge fear of failure. So early in my career, I had to learn how to get over myself and learn how to walk in humility and really redefine what is success. And success wasn't about me. It ended up needing to be more about the outcomes and the people I was working with. And that really ended up defining my career as I went forward later in life with different things that we were able to accomplish with some of our number one startups. We did a huge amount of innovation in a large number of different spaces and varieties. So it was really about the people and what we accomplished together.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And sounds very deliberate in terms of making sure you drive these outcomes with your customers,
True.
as
Intentionality.
yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and so, can you talk about some of the gaps in the industry that led to the formation of, what you're doing today and how it's even more relevant, right? Like when you actually developed the software and where we're at today.
Yeah. Well, we have a persistent gap, which is that the bad actors are usually and have always been out in front because they're innovating and they're looking for areas to exploit. So if they see an area of opportunity, like I was thinking about that today, I was thinking about doing a blog. I'm like, hey, what is the most memorable holiday attack you've ever had or that you remember back in the day? And I've been around for over 35 years. It's a long time. I don't look it, okay, but I'm older than I look. And the one I remembered was when there was a Chinese group in 2000, I think it was, and they had developed a 0-day. And I was the guy holding down the fort for my team, because if my team works hard and they're trustworthy and loyal, then I hold down the fort for Christmas. They get to take it off. And there was rumors of this new 0-day. I went out and captured the payload, made sure to handle it properly. And next thing you know, my computer's just lighting up like a Christmas tree. I'm like, what is going on here? I handled this and it had executed without me doing anything to make it execute. It it turned out it had a vulnerability on it that when Windows just tried to read the properties of it, allowed for it to execute without you actually executing or opening the file. Oops, ouch. Very powerful 0-day in Windows. So I very quickly isolated that machine, pulled it off. I had all the right controls in place to contain it, moved over to Linux, captured it, pulled it down, and I immediately notified my entire team because I knew it was a 0-day. Sorry, your Christmas is ruined. We got something big here. And what really got me out of that is that this was not your typical 0-day. What they were targeting was gamers. And it was like in 2006, I couldn't believe it. I figured it was credit cards, banks, something that was kind of newer and big in the FSI SAC space or something. And they were going after people with gaming accounts to target virtual accounts for real world cash. So like, I'm going to sell you this, online sword that took me 1,000 hours of gameplay, and I'm going to sell it to you for $2,000. I like that was they knew this. The bad guys had figured out that, hey, this is where the money is. And none of us had thought about that. Nobody had predicted that. And the bad guys knew that there was money to be made there. So where there's always a gap or there's an opportunity, the criminals are always thinking about that and looking for that. And they're good at it. They're better at it than we are. And they're good at exploiting it. And we have to figure out where that is and how to harden it proactively. We have to think like them in order to be good at counterintelligence.
Yeah. Yeah. No, very well said. So how do we prevent that, right? How do we make it systemic? How do we get, the right things in place so that we stop this from happening, or at least de-risk?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Retiring is a great one. Not having a computer. No, you can't do that. It is a little bit of a joke, but the real way to do it is you need to know what your personal threatscape is. If you do a good job of security, you would know what are my critical assets. Everyone on the team that's in leadership would all be able to consistently say the same answers of here's what they are and here's where they are. You'd all have a good inventory, and that would be inventory of your people, your hardware, your assets, and your users. And that therefore you have the ability to enable and do security proper.
Yep.
And then what
Yep.
you'd be able to do is you'd look at what are the prioritized threats that we have? What do we believe are attacking us? And you'd look at your logs and you'd actually confirm what has been attacking us or what do we believe might be attacking us, both consistently and regularly, like different forms of ransomware, e-crime, whatever, and what might be only attacking us once in a blue moon, but might have a high impact like nation state or things against our VIPs and people that are high targeted. Like I did one recently where we were analyzing the VIPs and we saw that there was an abnormality around the legal team being attacked at a much higher rate for certain kinds of an attack while they're being targeted, right? So you need to understand what's happening with the threats that are being prioritized against you in the certain business units and the individuals, and then how to counter those specific threats and actor groups. And it's all about prioritization and creating that visibility in those layers. So you can say, if I know these are my 5 or 6 main groups or actors or types of threats, how do they all overlay? And if all attack, say, my credentials in this way, or they all go after my cloud, whatever, then you're going to want to harden those first and test those and make sure you're really rock solid there to best reduce your risk, that kind of thing. And it's about risk reduction continually and then testing that and proving that out. Most people don't test and prove it out. And then hackers end up being their auditors. And you just really don't want to be there, but that's where a lot of people are.
Yeah. And look, that was jam-packed with information. Is essentially the playbook, right? Running us through how to loved it. I loved it. So to that and saying a lot, I think, something that struck out is you got to get back to basics, understand what you have, what can be targeted, right? Then getting specific as to, okay, what has actually happened and what are the vulnerabilities? What are we open to? And then next step is essentially coming up with a rock solid plan to close the gaps and try to demitigate, de-risk, and come up with a framework and continually make it better and better to where everybody understands and it becomes a culture.
Right. So I'm going to hire you. I mean, you're starting to speak roadmap now, right? And so really, if you do have a good roadmap, you're going to have a good baseline. That's what we call in the world of cybersecurity, where I know what I've got, and then what am I going to do in the near term, midterm, and long term. And then some of those things are going to shift. Like I was going to do this, but then there was a change in our funding, or there was a change in the attack surface, or whatever it's going to be. And so naturally, there's some changes you have to accommodate over time.
Absolutely. I love it. Thanks, Ken. And look, this one's a little bit deeper. I want to go in on the industry and we're hearing a lot about contextualized data. We're hearing a lot about, the need for contextual, not generic intelligence, right? And what does that mean to you? And, you know, why is that even important? Why is that even a question right now? I guess that I'm asking you.
Yeah. Well, context is king is the quote that I've said for the last 30 years. Because if you don't have context, then I don't actually know what I'm talking about. Because if I give you like an IP address and or some malicious information about that, I don't know what it means until I start to craft and create the context around it. And if I say this is actually related to denial of service activity and it was hosted on Russian infrastructure related to a Russian actor group, and that's related to some other Russian intelligence information we found related to some payloads that was related to your incident response. All of a sudden, you start connecting the dots that these might all be related, right? And so, what you do when you're doing the world of, say, incident response or intelligence or cyber threat intelligence is you create a hypothesis, and that hypothesis then drives the different rabbit trails you're going after. And this is a very important thing because a lot of people think they know what they're doing in the world of CTI, but they're not. What they do is they follow IOCs or indicators of compromise. Like they go after the IP and then they let the IP tell the story instead of having a hypothesis. And that's a very wrong way to do things. You need to have a brain and you need to have the human in the loop. And the human has to say, I think it might be we got hit by a denial of service attack, or maybe we get owned by some credentials that were weakly protected, or, some kind of vulnerability attack on our website. You need to think through what was the probable vector based on what you know. Then you need to piece together the different bits and pieces and create that context. And as you create that context, does it start to put together a puzzle that fits or not according to the human? And or the AI and whatever you're using to help support that, but a human has to validate it. And if you can do that and create a proper context and validate it, then you've got something that starts to support that or quickly disprove that hypothesis to allow you to move on to the other hypothesis and then move towards levels of trust and confidence as you figure out what happened or didn't happen or what you're trying to attribute.
Yeah, I love it. And a lot of that response is about getting faster, right?
True.
Now, the validation is important, the process, the theory, we cannot ignore that. And the human element, more importantly. But what are you seeing in terms of AI and its impact in the ability to get faster, right? In
Yeah.
terms of the response cycles.
Well, I'm glad you brought up speed. That's important. So AI is a double-edged sword. AI has the ability to rapidly speed up the low and moderate levels of processing that takes place with things like taking data and information and creating context, doing lookups, enrichment, and cross-correlating and doing things that typically the lower levels of an analyst would perform and do, and it can do it much quicker, right? I remember when I invented the Optic Threat DNA platform, 100% of it was machine learning, but it was done with a very large amount of brain energy from a human. And it would be me and my intelligence team. And for 3 years, we designed and developed and innovated and put it in place. And then it did this a massive amount of orchestration. And it gave you real-time attribution, real-time orchestration. 100% of everything that came in can be attributed and figured out in real time and correlated. Now you put AI into that. AI can dynamically do that. It can learn. It can create its own context. Put a little human in the loop to make sure it's healthy and it maintains and it manages. Super powerful. But AI also can hallucinate. It can be wrong and it could take us down the path real wrong, real quick, real fast, and it could be injected maliciously. And there are issues with model context protocol dependencies that are taking place now in the world that people don't understand. And MCP dependencies and interrelationships, much like third-party dependencies, will very quickly be abused by adversaries and be used to weapons against others. And MCP abuse is one of the big things on the horizon that people don't realize. And it's going to create a lot of problems in the world of AI. So there's a lot of things happening in the world of AI where people don't know what's going in, they don't know what's coming out, they don't know how to control it, and it's kind of a sprawling hydra out of control. It has some great powers and capabilities, but I recommend you go very slow, find someone who knows what they're doing, and put a limited amount of sensitive information there, if any at all, and be cautious in how you use it.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. So you've obviously had a front row seat to this for a long time, and to how the threat actors are evolving. You talk MCP. What's the real state of cybersecurity in general today that people are still that they're not acknowledging?
I would say the basics, right? And you said it before, you did a great job of that, and I appreciated that. That's right here in my heart. We still have a need for an internet driver's license. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a senior director or if you're just somebody who logged on for the first time. There are still people that don't know to hover before they click. There are still people that don't know the basics around how people are tricked by getting called or whatever. And it doesn't matter what your age is, young or old or anything like that. So companies struggle with this too, because it is the human factor. And even with our technologies, we make business decisions. And I've never been in a company, and I've worked with pretty much every Fortune 100 organization out there in consultation to date, and all the small groups as well. I mean, I've been around a long time. I have never, ever seen an organization that does this well. Okay. Ever. They all struggle because they make business decisions around, I don't want to pay for this hardware upgrade, or, we're going to keep this 2012 whatever server in production because then there's this dependency on this Java whatever, and then if we upgrade that, that's a $50,000 gotcha. And they do all these accepted risk things, and it's compounding, cascading failures. And somewhere along the line, somebody didn't realize that this decision led to that decision to this one, and now they've got 10,000 dependencies that are all integrated on that box. They didn't realize it, but that's what happens. And it's a threat and vulnerability management nightmare. I've literally seen over 50,000 high and critical vulnerabilities in an environment before because of accepted risk and of culture. And that's just completely unacceptable. Those are so easily exploited. So what are we doing for the core or for the base, right? How do we just make sure like our stuff is patched? We get it done quickly. And we know that patches are reversed within 14 days. Bad guys get the patches. And if it's a really big one and it matters and it's on your critical, or if it's on external, can you get it done in 10 days or less to make sure that 15-day window isn't going to get exploited? You've got to have an out of cycle patch capability for critical or highly exposed. If you don't have those kinds of things in place in 2026, you will get pwned, especially in the cloud.
Yep. And it's getting scarier and worse in the AI accelerated era, right? Who's keeping up faster? The defenders or the bad guys?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think anyone has visibility? Like we've talked a lot about in the last few years around this whole third-party risk thing, right? Well, I used to do a significant amount of third-party risk assessments related to APIs and third-party companies. And do you think anybody has visibility into all the different tentacles of their APIs and of all the AI connections and of all their third-party APIs?
It's going to be different tomorrow as it is today. And the answer is absolutely not. No, a resounding no.
No, it's horrible. So where you don't have visibility, we call that the threat of the unknown. And that is very, very real. And here's what will happen is
How do you quantify that? Right?
you can't. You can't. So you don't know. And until you know, your risk is through the roof, because how many threats do you need to compromise you? Right? You only need one. And you can have a third party that gets compromised that you don't even know you have a relationship with. That's through another third party, and it actually is a fourth party to you through them, through your APIs or through your AI or something with an A, and you have no idea, right? Because you don't have any requirements by contract. That's failure number one. And number two, you're not checking.
Fair point. Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of security controls and things you put in there as well, but you lose all of your control after you pay the bill. So the only way you do it is through contracting or renegotiation with your third parties. So those are all things that need to be done up front. And the normal vendor management controls that you put in place are more like around making sure you're a legitimate company, things of this nature, grossly missing all the security controls that you would need, or security compliance framework type controls around like what kind of a connection, is it secure, is it encrypted, how do you store your data at rest and in motion, all those things us geeks care about, let alone things around AI based things. That gets really complicated really quick, because AI, like I've already asked you this question, how many people in your company are using AI? Is it authorized? Do you have a policy or procedure around whether you're allowed to use Gemini or Copilot or something like that? And what information is allowed to go in there or not? Because it might be being used, or it might be exfiltrated from your company and you don't know. What if you took like you're working in HR, and then you took your salary stuff and then you popped it in there and said, give me some whatevers, and asked AI for some help. And now that gets learned, and then it gets popped out there on the internet. And all of a sudden you just did a data leak by accident, and it's going to reuse it and spit it out for somebody else. That's what's happening today in the world of AI. And you don't know because you, A, don't have a policy and procedure, and B, you don't have any way to stop or check or know that that's happening or train your people. And people don't think about that. They just do what they do to get the job done quick. And you haven't provided any means or resources for them internally to do that securely on-prem. So it's a failure across the board.
Yeah. And a lot of the failure comes down to just a lack of understanding or knowing, like you're
Right.
saying now. So, we bestow it upon ourselves in the industry to try to educate, but how do you do that effectively? And how do you ensure that, the awareness is there?
Well, that's that internet driver's license. So I'm a big believer in internet top down, and leadership top down. So I want to know when I talk to my stakeholders, like the board, my C-suite, and my chief leaders, the people with influence, what do they care about? Because they have different things they care about. When you talk about the business leaders, they're usually going to care about operations, finances, growth, reputation. It's more about the numbers and the way the business grows and how people look at them. It's going to be different than, like, say, your business unit owners who are going to care more about like how you keep the lights on and how many people on. I didn't even have enough budget last year and I wish I had better technology or whatever. They have different needs, more strategic, operational, or tactical, right? And then I want to know what makes them tick as a person and what do they care about personally. And then I want to influence them without authority. I want to be able to figure out strategically, I know this person works this way or that way. And in the end, people are people. So I'm going to be taking them out to lunch, and I want to make sure I'm strategically communicating. Like when I used to run global response teams, and I knew I was going to need to influence all of these such leaders in the future for budget and for different hours and changes of policies and procedures and growth of the business as we scaled it as a startup. I started a little newsletter, and that went upwards and outwards to the different BUs and also upwards to the C-suite. And I picked my metrics very carefully and my KPIs. And I wanted to communicate like when we were working on the weekends, how long our pages were, and like levels of effort and how hard our people were working, customer satisfaction. And I wanted to communicate that we're driving value. Our team was working really hard, and I projected what I thought would happen so that in the future it would tell the story I wanted it to tell, not in a manipulative way, but in a way that would be accurate and truthful and would influence them. So I got them bought into this. And then as the story started to tell itself 6 to 12 months later, and they've been reading this once a month distribution, it's visual, and it's telling a story that they care about, that they want to know about. They were like, whoa, we're getting a lot more stuff on the weekends. And I'm like, yeah, I'm concerned about client satisfaction. Aren't you? I'm like, yes, I very much am. That's right.
Yeah.
You, we don't know how we're going to do it on the weekends with the holidays coming up. And I'm very concerned about that. I'm only one guy, and I'll do what I can. Yeah, I totally get it. We should probably hire somebody. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You're amazing,
Yeah.
and that's
No,
called
absolutely.
influencing without authority, right? So it's just good leadership skills and tactics. I literally wrote a book on that subject with some other great leaders. And those are soft skills that you need to learn if you're going to be effective. And that trickles down when you do like, Extreme Leadership, one of my favorite books written by a Navy SEAL. You all need to work together and be on the same team.
Yeah, I love that. And pause for a second on the leadership topic. I'd love to get back on it. I'll get back on something you said where I'd say never underestimate the power of the human to human connection.
Amen.
And I think if you lose sight of that, you're going to lose a lot more in the near future. So think about, your relationships and developing those in a meaningful way, not about a lot of the noise. And that takes me to the next question on the noise and trying to get a signal out of it, right?
Oh,
With AI. So you could have that in the industry, but I'd like to get to know insight from you, from your leadership experience and understanding, how you prioritize on a day-to-day with everything that you see getting thrown at you. What's your advice in terms of trying to essentially make sure you do what's important, right? And take the time for that.
are you asking for me in my life or how I prioritize when I'm handling threats, or what are you asking?
Well, we'll do your day-to-day in terms of your calls, your clients, you have threats, you have a lot of things happening, in a 24-hour period, right? On
Right.
any given week. So how do you know what to focus on.
Yeah. Well, it's important for me to stay grounded as a person, first and foremost. I always tell this to my leaders as well. So for me, I'm faith-based person and my health. So it's really important for me to maintain my relationship with God and my rest and my diet and workout and serving others. If I'm doing those things, I'm going to be grounded and I'm going to come in as the full human being that I need to be. When I was young, I used to think that being a workaholic and giving 1,000,000% of everything I had was where it was at. And I used to think that my identity was my job. And that's a young man's game. And that is vain at best and foolishness, to be truthful. And it led to arrogance. And that's not the man I want to be. And, I did accomplish a lot. I got a lot done. And, I cranked out 30 programs in the first 5 years of consulting. And they were very successful. Okay, great. But I was not a human being. I was a robot. And it was not satisfying and it didn't lead to the life that I wanted. So I've got to bring my full human being to the workplace. And then I've got something to give, to your point, to other human beings. They are your most important asset. And people come into work and they have distractions. They've got lives, and those lives might be that, they got into a fight with their spouse that day, or their ailing parent is dying. They're just feeling a little down, and these are real things that are impacting their performance and capabilities at work. And if you actually know your staff and you're able to reach them, and I'm not suggesting that you need to be on this level, but I do know my people on a personal level, and I'm still friends with most of my people that reported to me 15, 20 years later on a very deep level. If you are able to establish deep relationships where you legitimately care about these people, you'll have very tight, loyal teams, high trust teams. And when you have high trust, high loyal teams, it'll be amazing what you can do. You can literally change the world, and we did. So there's a lot to be said for making sure that you're one of the individuals in the room that shows up and brings 100% of who you are, and that you actually care about the people and the plan and the process. And when you have high trust, you can work through your difficulties, your personality differences, and you can give each other more grace and understanding. When you're on your bad day, they're going to be there for you and they're going to be forgiving of you. And, if you're in a low trust environment, they're going to throw you under the bus and kick you to the door. So there's a lot to be said for that. And I've learned that. I feel like I've been able to topsy-turvy that in my career. And you're not ever going to be everyone's favorite cup of tea personalities, that sort of thing. But you can always be a great human being and strive to be that no matter what. I think it's important to show up and give it your all in that way.
Yep. Well said, Ken. No, I appreciate that. I think ultimately that is lost in today's industry in cybersecurity and business in general. So I commend you on that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think that a lot of people are struggling. It's a fairly sharp-edged world in the world of cyber, and people have kind of gotten into it more for themselves. And there's a lot of people that feel, I think ego has always been a very big deal in this world of cyber. And then there's people who I think just get really insecure because you look at my resume and you'll get intimidated and look at what I've accomplished. But I only accomplished that because of the people I was with. And I had amazing teams, amazing people, and I was supported, and I was willing to work really hard, and I was willing to continually grow and make mistakes and dive in and learn more. And I look forward to learning more. People get insecure because
Yeah.
there's so much I don't know. Like, I know some cloud. I've designed some of the most important cloud things in the world with people, and I still don't feel like I know cloud. Like, cloud is intimidating because it's super complicated. And I know a lot more about cloud than most people, but I still feel like a baby in the cloud. And I know a lot more about a lot of things, but I'm still a baby. There's so much, like, even the things I literally wrote the book on, I would feel like it's just so overwhelming. There's so much you can't know that you can't
Yeah.
know it all.
The more you know, the more you don't know, right?
That's
At the
right.
end of the
That's
day.
right. But how do you handle that, right? And I think a large majority of people, my observation has been, at least this is my rose-colored glasses, I believe the very large majority of the human race, when they don't feel good enough, they're shame-based, and they tend to behave in a way that is not productive for the rest of the humans around them. And there's a variety of ways that people cope when they don't feel good enough, or when they don't feel like they know it all, or they don't know the answer, and they're avoidant, or they are attacking, or they're whatever it's going to be. And that's just the nature of working in a field that's incredibly intimidating, there's too much to know, and no one wants to admit that they don't know. So when I'm working on a team, I try to establish a culture where it's popular to admit that we don't know. Israel actually does this, and that's why they're so good at what they do in innovation and all of that. And they want to constantly admit what they do know and what they don't know and come up with creativity and thinking out of the box. And even the youngest can challenge the oldest in the room in a respectful manner. And I'm a huge fan of that type of culture creation, as long as it's done with respect and loyalty, and then doing it as a team, because we're all a team.
Yeah, yeah. And Ken, so shifting gears a little bit, into 45A, because clearly, you are the differentiator, but ultimately, can you speak to, the platform and maybe some differentiators out there for the audience, and maybe an example, right, of how you've been able to kind of bring that to life?
Yeah, well, 4D5A security, I started in 1992. Initially, I did a whole bunch of program and customized things for people over the years, but now we offer um, customized boutique security services for firms, and we've done it for Fortune 100 all the way down to universities, to individual firms, as needed. I really like doing the things that I'm passionate about, like coming in and uplifting an organization. We just did one for an entire sovereign nation, and we came in and looked at their entire everything. So penetration testing, we went in and did a readiness assessment, like a CIS 18, a bunch of services around all of that, and a roadmap, security roadmap form, that sort of thing. Our differentiators are that, like, when we come in to do incident response, we are what we call ninjas at night. So normal incident response, they're going to come in and fly everybody in and be on-prem. And that's immediately a whole lot of money real quick, real fast, because you're paying for all those flights, hotels, everything else. And we don't want to touch your network and be on it. We want you to be the experts on your network, because you are. And you're paying to retrain all those other people that are being flown in to do that, plus all their lodging and hotel and everything. And so what we do is a shared responsibility model. And we're paid to be the IR experts to assist you. It's frustrating at times because you're not going to know security. You're in this pinch for a reason. And now we have to rely on you to do some things. But, it's a lot easier and charge you a bunch and gouge you and say, you had it coming and I'm making a lot more money. That's what most IR companies do. I know this because I worked for some of them in the past. But a shared responsibility model makes me feel a lot better as a human. And we usually are 20% of what it costs everybody else. So we save you a significant amount. I did this for another company last year, just for the quote to get them in the door. Okay, we were $1,000 cheaper just for the initial quote for what we actually charged for the whole thing. Okay. Wow. We were super cheap. And it was a super complicated nation state cover up ransomware nuker that took place on the way out. And you're also getting some of the most important assets in the world, because with me, I'm a distinguished fellow. I'm top 1% in the world, formally recognized. And you get people on my team, like I have a Russian linguist analyst that's one of the best attribution experts in the world, native Russian. I have a Chinese guy that is amazing at reverse engineering, and he breaks code. We've actually broken the code before and done the reverse engineering and been able to break the ransomware stuff and do full recovery. So we have some pretty cool resources, people that can do some really neat things. The people like that, when we go in and do stuff around SOC, SOAR and all that, our guys have built the biggest ones in the world. So you're getting true ninjas at a discount price. We only want to work for you in the evenings. If you make us work during the day, we have to take time off, then we're going to do a lot more. But, if you work with us and we only have to get back to you in the evenings or during, our slack times, then we're really affordable and we're your new best friend. We're augmenting you, and we'll do our syncs in the mornings and the evenings. And the Ninja at Night thing is it's brilliant. So it works super great and it's super affordable. So that's what we're about.
I love it. Well said. That's amazing. So, look, you've gone through a lot, and I really appreciate the time. We've talked about purpose-driven leadership, protecting the underserved, accelerating the defender advantage, really teaching the next generation, and it's been extremely insightful. So, the question of what are the goals for next year seem a bit limiting. So I'll ask, kind of, what's still motivating you today? Right, you seem passionate across all these areas. So I guess what's the mission from a personal perspective? What's next?
For years, I was also in a TSSCI poly space, and when you're in that space, you can usually see 10 plus years out. And I just left that space a year ago, and so I know where the ugly is and where it's coming from. And commercial space has a long ways to go, like you said, in the foundations. They're struggling to get those core foundations in place in those operations. And I'm seeing a really troubling problem with a lack of funding and prioritization of security. People just don't want to pay for security right now. They say, "Oh, we got all these jobs and this, that, and the other," and they're not funding security. They could care less about security, and they're going to get pwned left and right. And then what's going to happen is regulatory and compliance and other matters will make them go bankrupt, or they will be funding those jobs in a much more expensive matter. So I'm trying to help companies do this more affordably to the left of boom before they get pwned and before they make these really poor business decisions. But that's what's happening. They're just tightening in all the wrong ways. And it's a really poor business decision for the entire industry. And at the same time, we have an explosion of AI and all these new connections without security in mind that will lead to the next cybersecurity incident boom. And we're not keeping that in mind, especially with MCPs. MCPs are not being checked for trustedness and what's behind them, what they're connected to, and whether or not they're being abused. And that means we're going to have a lot of abuse there. So there's more threats on the horizon. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's absolutely, it's never great to ignore the threat, but it's an even worse time to ignore the threat. It is detrimental to the existence of your business, right? So, absolutely.
It's better to do it now more affordably and do it proactively. It's always much more cost effective than it is to wait reactively. When we did this recently for one of our clients, we found that they were open to a 0-day that was trivial to attack. And just by making a couple small changes, they were able to block that. Otherwise, they would have been pwned within a few days.
Well, that was incredible, Ken. Thank you so much for your time. To those that want to reach out, what's the best way to get in touch?
Go to 4g5asecurity.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.